This is a summary of the main arguments about the problem of evil, and it's a result of some lectures that I did in some schools at the beginning of this year. I hope it's of some use to people who are approaching GCSEs and A Levels. Now, the problem of evil is defined by Epicurus, and is then quoted, of course, by Lactantius and by Hume. So, if God is all good and evil exists, where does it come from? If God is all powerful and God didn't stop evil, then he's not all powerful. So we've got a problem. If evil exists and God and an all good, all powerful God exists, evil can't exist. Or more worryingly, God can't exist. The problem of evil compromises the existence of a good God. Now, what you're interested in are the two major theodicies of Augustine and Irenaeus. But let's begin with the idea of Augustine that evil is an absence of good, privatio boni. So evil, in a sense, doesn't exist. One way to get round the inconsistent triad is to redefine the terms. And when we look at modern writers on this subject, and for example process theology, the theologians are saying that God is incapable of stopping evil. God is, in other words, not all powerful. So we solve the inconsistent triad by saying, well, the idea of God as all powerful, not quite so. God cannot stop moral evil, or indeed certain types of natural evil. So I've got 3 points to make before we go on to looking at the theodicies. The first is to redefine our terms. This solves the inconsistent triad, the Epicurus problem. Evil may be redefined as the absence of good, or we may modify the extent of God's power or goodness in order to account for the existence of evil. Secondly, evil may be seen as just another part of God's activity. Now, there are 3 texts in the Old Testament which are particularly important here. The idea is, I create good and I create evil. I'm responsible for the whole lot. Amos 3:6, Lamentations 3:38, and Isaiah 45, verse 7. Now, this is then defended by Jewish mysticism, Kabbalism, where evil is just another aspect of God's revelation. The third point you are more familiar with, which is the free will defense. Now, the free will defense is then elaborated on in the first of the 2 theodicies, Augustine's, the limited sovereignty idea, the idea that the universe is created perfectly, and then the collective behavior of man and fallen angels means the universe degenerates. We are responsible for the evil, for the moral evil and the natural evil that is around us. It's a misuse of our free will. I have 3 objections to Augustine's theodicy. How can a perfect universe go wrong? You may say, oh, but in fact, look at it. If I've got a perfect computer, if I buy a really good computer and it breaks down, who do I blame? I don't blame myself, I blame Apple. The idea of a perfect universe that is now degraded, where's the scientific evidence for that? And the third point, which I find a little bit dodgy, is the idea of eternal punishment, the idea of eternal hell. I don't see that continual and eternal punishment serves any purpose at all. Let's go on to our second theodicy, the defense of God against the problem of evil. Theos, God, dike, justice, defending God. The second theodicy, which is important, is that of Irenaeus, the soul-making theodicy. We are put on this earth in order to be educated. Now, I have some serious problems with this. John Hick, of course, quite likes it. It's something which is particularly favoured in schools and sixth forms. Rather than looking at the Irenaean theodicy as a form of school, when we look at Irenaeus, let's imagine him more as a car factory. Remember, the word in Latin for create is fiat, the divine fiat. It's also, of course, got Italian resonance as a rather wonderful car. So let's think of the Irenaean theodicy as a garage. God creates the initial model, and then we have to road test it in a hostile environment. But let's look at the criticisms of Irenaeus' theodicy. The idea that evil is somehow useful, the idea that evil is good for us. Fyodor Dostoevsky, in the Brothers Karamazov, takes the opposite view. He says, well, if you had the opportunity of creating a world with lots of evil to teach us, would you do so? No. As for this idea that this is the best of all possible worlds, I just don't buy that one. It's like accepting second-rate work from the plumber. Oh, it's as good as you're going to get, mate. Well, I would want my money back. We can look at the actual extent of human suffering. Far too much. Think of the Holocaust. And I also question the apparently Victorian idea that in order to have a good education, you need to suffer. I don't see that pain is necessary to education. Now this brings us finally on to one of my favourite terms, apokatastasis, and this is most displayed by Origen. And Origen also takes the idea, the image of a school, that this world is a school and that we need evil in order to learn. But he thinks of it as a cyclic thing. So the ultimate evil, the ultimate suffering is hell, and that is something that brings us back round to purification and back again to being good. So the whole of creation is starting off good, degenerating into bad, coming round and going back into good again. Evil, in other words, is a temporary experience, and the devil himself, in this cyclical system, is destined for salvation. Of course, Origen was completely condemned for this, but it is a solution to the problem of evil.